If you're ready for freedom from the grind, then passive income from real estate investing is the best way to get you there. If you don't know where to start or what to do next, then the Rent Roll Radio Show is the best place to get you there. Join us while we discuss the best practices, strategies, and mindset you'll need and give you actionable content to get you from where you are to where you want to be. Hey, Rent Roll Radio listeners. As always, I'm your host, Sterling Chapman. Today, we're joined with Dominique Gunderson with Gunderson Homes. Dominique is originally from Los Angeles. He currently lives in Colorado, but invests in New Orleans, Louisiana. So I'm really excited to talk to her, hear her story, and learn more about long distance investing. Dominique, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Dominique actually put on a really cool conference a couple of weeks ago in New Orleans and invited me to come up on stage and share our meetup. So thank you so much for reaching out. It was a great show. It was a great conference. I really enjoyed the speakers. Got to chat with the speakers afterwards. They're going to be on the show too. So thank you for facilitating that. That was cool.
Nice. That's awesome. I love to hear it.
So can you tell us your story? Like how'd you get into real estate? How'd you get from LA to New Orleans and Colorado? What's going on? Tell us the story.
Yeah, so I'm from Los Angeles, and that's kind of where I got my start in real estate. I started straight out of high school, so just kind of always knew that this is the path I wanted to take and what I was going to do for a career, specifically investing. But I got my start just kind of in the real estate agent world. I just was shadowing and working under an agent as soon as I graduated high school. Got my license right away and was just kind of like learning the ropes of sales and marketing and contracts and all the things, the basics of real estate. And I did that for just about 2 years, my first 2 years out of high school. And then I jumped in more on the investing side. So that's when I started wholesaling for a while, and then started my own company eventually, which today is what I do with a main focus on flipping houses. So yeah, it took me a couple of years to go out of state. I definitely got my roots and got started in California. But ultimately it just made a lot of sense once I was ready to start actually taking ownership of properties to go to a more affordable, less competitive market.
Yeah, absolutely. So why New Orleans? I mean, there's a lot of markets.
Yeah, it's a good question. My dad lives out there. He lives in Harvey, which is kind of the outskirts of New Orleans area. So honestly, it was just a really easy connection for me. When I started thinking about what other markets could I go to, that was pretty much the only one that I had a really close connection to as far as an easy place to come and visit, someone I really trusted on the ground to tell me about the area and neighborhoods and stuff like that.
Awesome. And so why flipping?
Flipping is something that I always kind of had an interest in doing since I was like 15. That was kind of what I had my eyes set on. And kind of the more that I've gotten into real estate, I love flipping. It's honestly like a big passion, just transforming properties. But the more you get into real estate, you learn about other strategies and avenues. Obviously, it makes more and more sense as you go to get more passive and do rentals or just apartments and bigger deals. So the single family fix and flip stuff was kind of just something that I always had an interest and passion in and just kind of jumped into to get started, to get the ball rolling and get experience. And most of all, just build capital. And now I'm kind of, this year is like the first year where I'm right at that stage of flipping a ton and just like still growing capital and doing this full time and living off of it, but also starting to expand into doing more on the rental side and just other types of deals.
Awesome. And where are you buying rentals? Are you buying rentals in New Orleans as well?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So it's so funny because I hear that story a lot. Everybody kind of starts with wholesaling and then kind of like, once they're like comfortable with the contracts and the doing the homework, they kind of graduate to flipping and then they make money flipping to buy rentals. I had a high paying job when I started in real estate. So I just started buying rentals and then I started syndicating apartment complexes. And then I realized that so I bought apartment complexes and
80 rental properties before I ever flipped a house. So I did it backwards. What I found was the systems I had set up that created, the deal flow and the available labor to fix them up and all that kind of stuff. It was just an easy transition. And then another thing I like to say a lot, and I'm curious to get your feedback for how life's been for the last year as a real estate investor. But, when I first started buying properties and I started buying rental, I just burned everything. Well, and I always kind of like talk down or flip or talk back down on flipping as it was risky and it was just something I never wanted to do. And then I just built up this big rental portfolio, this big financial like foundation. And then I started flipping houses because like I could kind of bail myself out of trouble at that point, right? Like brand new in 2018 when I had a $7,000 net worth, right? If I had borrowed money to flip a house and lost 40 grand, like I don't even know like what that would look like. Like that's like negative bankruptcy. But now, I haven't lost 40 grand on any houses, but if I did, like I could just sell a rental and bail myself out. And I certainly did get slapped in the face, in late 2022, like I think a lot of us did. So what was it like? What was it like for you? Did you get hurt? Did you change your strategy? Did you see it coming? I mean, we all saw it coming, but we also all couldn't like pass up that next, so tell me about it. How was the transition for you?
Yeah, definitely 2022, the first couple quarters were as strong as ever. And then we saw kind of a drop off. So I was definitely anticipating it. I didn't know to what degree or what level. But pretty much in like Q1 of 2022, I tightened up my buy box for what I was buying. And I just didn't stray from it, even if the deal looked good or, something I couldn't pass up. But basically I was buying only properties with resale values under 200,000. So I was staying in a very safe part of the market, that first time home buyer, entry level stuff on the resale. And honestly, I'm pretty glad I did because I really didn't get hurt at all in 2022. Actually had a really good year overall. There was a couple of properties that didn't perform like amazing towards the end of the year. But, it was, again, still just so offset by the good first couple quarters. And it's not like properties were in my price point were like dropping 20% off the list price.
Right.
You still had a really competitive buyer pool, a strong buyer pool. A lot of people still looking in where can I find a nice home for as cheap as possible? So that was, I think, what kept me pretty safe throughout it.
Awesome. Yeah, I've got a couple of spinoff questions from that. One is what is your buy box?
It's honestly still pretty similar. I haven't really strayed a ton from what I set last year. Just kind of the outskirt neighborhoods of New Orleans is where I focus. So mainly on the West Bank, which is across the river from the city. That's pretty much where I'm buying as far as location goes. And then price point, again, it's that entry level 200K and under on the resale side. I'm taking on a couple of larger deals this year that stray a little bit from that buy box, just in a slightly higher end price point. But only because the purchase price has been so low compared to the exit. Like I feel like it has a lot of padding.
A lot of room.
Yeah.
And I mean, the higher end stuff does get hurt. And that's typically the first to go. I had a house appraised for 525 in the summer of 2022. And we just accepted a contract for like 430 on it.
Dang, that's
now
crazy.
We're still making 50 grand, but like we should have made 150, Like,
right.
That's the kind of stuff that the market did to me.
Yep. And see, those are like, to me, those are deals like, sure, yeah, you could look at it that you lost 100 or you made 50,
Yeah. And that's how my brain, at the gap in the game, my brain, when I say I got hurt in 2022, I didn't lose money on any flips, but I didn't make all the money that I was planning on making all those flips.
Right.
And I guess shame on me for counting the chickens before they hatch. But when I say hurt, that's what I mean. The other question I have about your price point properties. So I certainly agree with you that like, the high end stuff, and I mean, when I say high end, like that was the most expensive house I've ever done.
Yeah.
I personally like the 250 to 350 spots. I What I don't like about sub 200, and what you're saying, I love it in theory, and it sounds like you've had a lot of success with it. But what I keep finding in sub 200 is I have a really hard time getting the buyers to the closing table. Like it gets a lot of attention. It just the buyer pools are typically have a harder time getting approved for the loans, and in the beginning of 2022, when we had a 3% interest rate, like it was easy to get them pushed through. But now, like their debt to incomes were so tight already that we have a hard time. Like I think the last three houses that I did that were sub two, it ended up being on the market for like three times as long as as a normal, like a 250, 350 house, because we have to go through like two or three buyers. Because the first two like fall out, like their credit issue, debt to income issues. So we have a harder time getting those to the closing table just to find qualifying buyers. The other problem I have with the smaller houses is like, if you have a 2,000 square foot house in a lower income area, right, where the ARV is 175, and you have a 2,000 square foot house in a higher income area where the ARV is 350, the roof is going to cost the exact same amount on both of those houses, and it's going to be a much larger percentage of your cost for the smaller ones. So that's another thing that has always kind of freaked me out. Like, spending like all of those high ticket item, like an AC for a 2,000 unit, you know what I mean? 2,000 square foot house, it costs the same in a bad neighborhood as it does in a good neighborhood. So I guess the caveat to that would be like the market knows, right? So you're buying those houses at a bigger discount. But I've just had a problem fitting my rehab in and then getting the buyers to the closing table. Have you had any kind of issues with either one of those, with those lower price point houses?
Yeah, it's a really good point for sure. I'll kind of address a few things I've learned on both, but for the reno stuff, I think it's definitely just kind of come with trial and error about like doing some projects and seeing how quickly you can get to $80,000 or spending like a crazy amount on $180,000 house, and you think about the margins on that and you're like, dang, I had to have bought that house for like 40 or 50K to still be making money,
Yeah.
So that's like exactly what I've done. Like I just set my reno budget very realistically up front. I'm not unrealistic to say like, look, this is a lower end house. We're going to spend so much less. Like you're saying, the reality is the things you might spend $1 per square foot less on, like flooring or something, that's not what's breaking the bank on your reno. It's the stuff that costs 10 grand per line item, So I've just made low offers, honestly. And like, I lost a lot of deals because of it. I know that, when there's wholesalers or something that's getting pitched around and I'm not the strongest offer, like, and I've kind of just been okay with that, and just taken on the deals that I know have enough margin on it. Those higher end or higher dollar figure rehab properties, when my resale is only like somewhere between 170 and 200, like my purchase price is like 50, and that's just what it is. I'm either having to go direct to seller or just really negotiate with the wholesaler, or I buy it.
Where do you get most of your deals? Are you doing direct seller marketing, or are you getting most of them from wholesalers?
So almost all of my deals come from these two categories. One is either buying at foreclosure auctions. And then the second half is pretty much stuff that gets sent to me. So whether that's an agent or a wholesaler or someone I've done business with in the past.
Awesome. So tell me more about the foreclosure auctions.
Yeah.
How did you learn about it? Where do you go? What do you do? How does that work? We haven't had anybody in a number of years say they've had a lot of success with the foreclosure auctions.
Yeah. They're hit or miss, honestly. Last year I bought like probably more than 50% of my deals from foreclosure auction. This year so far, I've gone every single week and I've only bought one. So this year, like 90% of my deals have come from wholesalers, agents, someone sending it to me direct. So it's a hit or a miss, honestly. Like sometimes it's really good and sometimes it's not. And it literally is kind of up to luck. Like it's how many of your competitors showed up that day and decided to bid on the same property you're bidding on, and all these factors that are just kind of up for luck. But
do you have to go in person?
Yeah, so they are live. So I send someone from my team on my behalf.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I was like, are you flying back and forth every week just to go to the auction?
No, yeah. So you could send someone on your behalf, but yeah, you kind of just research your parish or county and what days of the week. They usually have them every week. So you just kind of research like where the auctions are, what the rules are, because they're different for every parish. The rules change. Some you have to present 100% of the cash right then and there. Some you just need a deposit. So you really just have to do the due diligence for where you're buying and where they host it and all the rules and stuff. And then you get the list ahead of time. You pick and choose which ones you're going for and try to do as much due diligence as possible on those. You show up and kind of see what happens day of.
Awesome. How are you financing your project?
Everything I do is financed with private money. So I just raise it. Honestly, most of my lenders have come to me through like social media stuff I posted or podcasts I've been on, and just kind of reach out and ask how they're able to get involved with passive investing. And so I offer essentially debt funding, just a straight up interest percentage for capital, and then take the money and do the projects with it.
Awesome. So you're not profit sharing. You're just doing them a flat. Let me ask you this: do you do like an annual promissory note, or are you doing like a collateralized, like deal level? Like, hey, here's the deal. Bring in all the money. You get first position, and then escrow the construction money for me, or whatever. Like,
I've done both. It's usually the lender's preference. Probably a bigger percentage of mine are just a promissory note, but some like to be tied to a specific property with a mortgage.
Yeah, for sure. So how are you fixing them up? What is your construction crews? Are you just calling it random GCs? And then do you have different crews? Because I know you do about 10 projects simultaneously. And I usually do about 10 projects simultaneously. And I always hate it because we're always bottlenecked. Because I've got my crews. Like I have a limited, I don't hire third party, construction workers or general contractors. I just have my guys. So when we get, we can do one house in 3 weeks, but if we're doing 10 at a time, it drags out. So I'm curious, who's doing your work? And then do you have different crews, and how do you manage the bottlenecks?
Yeah, so that's probably one area where I can't save as much as someone like yourself who's there on the ground. Like there's just so much when it comes to the actual construction that I am just not able to have oversight over on the day to day. So I do hire that out. I have basically one main kind of general contractor who I communicate with, and he manages all my job sites and he manages all the crews. So depending on, which properties we actively have crews on what days and what stages they're all in, he kind of keeps track of sending people to the right job site on the right day and what material we need and when we need it for which job, all of the oversight type of stuff.
Is he a third party general contractor? Is he a direct employee?
No, he's a third party. Yeah.
So, but you use him for all of your projects, like oversight on all of your projects.
Yes.
So his compensation is just the same as it would be if he was being a normal general contractor. You just pay it every time.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
And how did you find that? How did you find the problem with contractors mostly is that you can't trust them? And I don't mean that in a, like, there's a lot of contractors you can trust. There's just a lot you can't. And so how were you able to build a relationship with one that you could trust, one that shows up on time, one that, does it on budget? And because what I find is with third party people, if they check all of those boxes, they like get too big and become too expensive, right? If they're worth a crap, they get too expensive because people are willing to pay for them because so many people aren't worth a crap. I always say it's budget, schedule, and quality. You got to pick two of the three.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's a good point for sure. Honestly, for me, it was just like trial and error. The guy I work with right now wasn't the first person I ever hired. It was going through a couple and figuring out what didn't work and what my expectations would now be or how they'd change moving on to hiring somebody else. So it took a few, and I always just started small in the beginning, just give them one job and see how it goes. But to set that expectation up front as well, that like, look, we do a lot of jobs, we do a lot of business. So if you're someone that's looking to expand your business and grow to the next level, like I can bring value to you also. I can help you get there. And so I think that was a big part of it too, is finding someone who was in that boat. They weren't already huge. And I was just like another client. I was actually bringing value to what they wanted. And, as long as I guess we communicated well, we worked well together, I can continue providing work and he can continue providing me, like you're saying, the things that are important, the timeline, the budget, the trust, all the things, then the deals are going to keep coming. And I think over time, it's just helped kind of keeping each other in check. Like I have definitely gotten bids and quotes and just hired, if something came in really high, like a roof from him came in just way too high, I'll let him know and I'll tell him that someone else is going to do that roof. Like keep this in check for next time if you want to keep getting the jobs.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that I wanted to talk about a little bit more because they all start off great. Like everybody will do the first job or two great. And then like eventually their true colors come out and it's either one, it comes out one or two ways. One is the work starts to slip, right? The quality starts to slip. They stop coming in so reliably and all that. The other thing is if they truly do have a great work ethic, the price will keep going up. So I've had, every 6 months, I find my guys just bumping it. And I'm like, hey, we need to, or I'm going to go get somebody else to do it. And that usually, they'll usually do what they can get away with. And when you kind of say, hey, look, like we're going to end up getting somebody else to do the work, all of a sudden everybody gets back on the same page real quick.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah. Well, cool. So what's next for you?
That's a great question. I think my business is always just continuing to like expand and I'm just open to whatever opportunities kind of come. But in the near future, as far as like what I have planned, just want to keep growing as far as volume goes on the flipping side and just getting, more and more properties, and kind of just keeping the best of the best ones as rentals. So I'm sort of starting to move into that boat this year where I feel like I actually have the capacity, the team, the capital to keep kind of the best deals that I'm not ready to let go of and start getting a little bit more passive in that sense. So yeah, those are kind of what I have coming, but just trying to buy more deals and know that that'll just increase opportunity of ones to hold.
Absolutely. What is your average flip look like? What is your average profit per flip?
So I usually try to target at least 15% of whatever we're into the deal for.
Okay.
Yeah. So if between purchase and reno, we're in for 100,000. I want to make at least 15,000 on it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective. I've never heard anybody say they looked at it that way before. Where'd you learn that? Or was that just, you just came up with that? 15 sounds like a good number.
So I actually kind of dove pretty deep into this when I was wholesaling. I would ask my investors who are buying from me just a ton of questions. And this is kind of how I learned and felt like I was ready to jump out and start flipping on my own. But one of the things I always looked at is like, how do you guys analyze whether it's a deal you're going to take or not? Because at the end of the day, it's usually comes down to, does it make me enough money? And so I heard all the answers. I mean, some looked at return, some looked at a set dollar figure, some wanted it to be like a percentage. Like there was just all these different answers. And so I feel like just after kind of analyzing what other people were doing, it was a good average, I guess. If you broke it down to percentage, like, hey, how much are you spending to make that dollar figure that you're targeting? And it seemed to usually fall like somewhere between 10 and 15% was always like a pretty good return for somebody, and anything over was gravy.
Yeah, so I'll say this. I didn't even think about it that way until you said it, but now I'm working backwards, and that's exactly what I do. So we do we want to be all in, like purchase plus renovation for 70% of the ARV. And then you got to assume about 10% financing charges and about 5% realtor fees on selling it on the back end. So if you model it out for 30 and then you take that 15 out, you're left with 15. We're landing in the exact same spot.
Right. Yeah. No, that's, I've never looked at it that way either. So that's cool.
Cool. Well, I've heard that you're plugged in with the Bigger Pockets community up there. How did that relationship form?
Yeah. Kind of just naturally and organically, but I had just reached out to a couple people over there about just kind of what I was doing, my story and stuff, to just inquire about being on the podcast. And it wasn't quick by any means, but over time, we ended up getting a show scheduled. It was almost a year ago, so it was like last spring. I was on the podcast, and then from there, it just kind of started opening doors. They put me on another show they have called On the Market.
With Kathy.
Yeah. So I was on there just for like a little house flipping segment. And just through doing the different podcasts and shows and stuff, you just kind of get to meet some of the other people that are involved, and just get to chat and talk about what they're doing and what I'm doing, and just trading ideas. So it's grown over time, but slowly for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to get things moving over there. I want to hop to our radio round just to let our listeners get to know you a little bit better. A few quick questions for you. The first one is, what is your favorite book?
I will say a book that just really changed the course of my investing, and it's called Raising Private Capital. It's actually a Bigger Pockets book by Matt Faircloth. Man, that is one book for sure that just changed the course of my business majorly. I wasn't using private capital before that. I didn't know what questions to ask, what paperwork to draft up, how to pitch it. And he just outlines all that stuff. And as soon as I did that, a couple months later, I started working with my first private investor, and I've never gone back. It's just scaled me in like ways I couldn't imagine.
Awesome. Yeah, Matt is a sweetheart for sure. That's a great book. The next question is, what's your favorite quote?
Okay, I hope I don't butcher this too much, but it's a quote that basically says, be willing to do what other people won't do today so that you can have what other people won't have tomorrow. And I feel like I'm pretty young. I'm only 25, and I got started in this at 17. So I've always kind of been like the young one in the business, and just kind of looking around at my surroundings and being like, man, what are other people my age doing right now? And like, what am I sacrificing, but looking ahead to be like, but where am I going to be in 5-10 years that they're not? And that's really just like honestly driven me to do most of what I've done.
Yeah. You're 100%. That I think there's so many variations of that quote out there. I know Dave Ramsey has one variation of it, of like, live like no one else today so you can live like no one else tomorrow. I mean, it's a pretty popular concept, just delayed gratification. But to answer, like you're 25. I don't even remember when I was 25. I mean, I might have been blacked out the entire year. You know what I mean? Like doing fun stuff that I don't like. God, I wish I was buying real estate, and I wish I was holding real estate. Stop selling your stuff. When I interviewed Jay Scott the first time, the guy who wrote the book on flipping houses, my favorite quote from that interview was, I regretted every house I've ever sold. The guy who wrote the book on flipping houses regrets selling every house he ever sold.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, it's like you see all the compounding that happens over the years, and I can only imagine.
Yeah, it's stupid. I bought houses in terrible areas that for like 70 grand that I just knew were going to be worth 70 grand 20 years from now. And 3 years later, they're worth 150 grand. It's like, how did that happen?
Yeah, seriously. No, I'm in the same boat. And I kind of just look at it like, I recognize that that's where I was at that time. And like, I didn't have the capacity. I was young and like just trying to grow and scale and build capital. So I don't regret it, but I totally understand the concept of like, man, you just see like crazy wealth that builds even just from a couple of years of holding something. You can't even imagine like 30 years later what that's going to feel like.
Right. What's your favorite thing to do outside of work?
I love being outdoors, anything outdoors. One of the big reasons I moved to Colorado, just be in the mountains and hike more.
I every time I have somebody from California or Colorado on the show, I ask that question and I immediately get pissed off because they always answer the same thing. I love outdoors. I live in this beautiful city with these beautiful trees and these beautiful mountains and these beautiful rivers. And I'm over here looking at asphalt.
Maybe get an Airbnb, you know?
Dude, I'd love to. They're astronomically expensive.
Yeah, I know.
It is on my to-do list to buy an Airbnb in Colorado. I was just kind of waiting for them to come down a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our show, Dominique. Thank you also again for putting on that great conference in New Orleans. I look forward to coming every time you put it on. And it was great meeting you, and I really look forward to keeping up with you in your journey.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
This episode was brought to you by Crestworth Capital. If you're a busy professional and ready to make passive income from real estate investing, then go to crestworthcapital.com where you'll be able to download a free copy of our ebook to help you get started today. Until next week, happy investing.